we try tonight to get to the bottom of why we think this is happening. We do a quick research and we say, okay, how is it that we mainly present Imam Ali alayhi salam to the world? Let's have a look at, for example, 2 months ago when we were having the 13th of Rajab, the celebration for his birthday. Or let's have a look at these nights, the nights of his martyrdom. And we were to do a bit of a journey of exploration. Let's have a look at the centers, the Islamic centers, the Husseyniyat, the Masajid, the social media platforms, the articles online, and see what is the most commonly spoken about topic about Imam Ali alayhi salam. Have a guess. What do you think? We mainly find the most common thing, if you were to do your research in the Islamic literature and in current literature, is the controversy of the Khilafah of Rasulullah and who is more worthy of becoming the Khalifa after Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa Ali alayhi salam or this person. Ali alayhi salam or this person. Ali alayhi salam or this person. That is what you find is the most common issue that is discussed in Islamic literature, historic and current. And when we try to use this and present it to the world, they say, well, Ali is a disputed character in history. Ali is a character in history. And when we look at the words of Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam, he says something very interesting about this. He says in Nahj al-Balagha, فَيَا لِلَّهِ وَلِلشُّورَى متى اعترض الريب في مع الأول منهم حتى صرت أقرن إلى هذه النظائر. Woe be to Shura. Since when was I ever compared to people like this, so that people and being compared to counterparts that are not in English, we are not doing any justice to our Imam when we are comparing him to others. In another hadith, he says, أنزلني الدهر حتى قيل معاوية وعلي. That time has been so unfair to me that I am being compared and spoken to about in comparison to someone like Muawiyah. That who is more righteous? Who was with the haqq, Ali or Muawiyah? Imam Ali alayhi salam says, since when am I going to get compared to people like this? Ali salamullahi alayhi is of the caliber of the prophets. Ali salamullahi alayhi is not someone to be compared to even to other companions, even to other righteous companions of the Prophet, let alone ordinary human beings. If we look at the Islamic literature, we find Ali salamullahi alayhi, when spoken about by Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, he describes him like the prophets. This is in a book by Al-Bayhaqi, who is a Sunni scholar, and he has a book called Fada'il al-Sahaba, the merits of the companions. He says, what do I say about Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam when the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi had says in his hadith, من أراد أن ينظر إلى آدم في علمه وإلى نوح في تقواه وإلى إبراهيم في حلمه وإلى موسى في هيبته وإلى عيسى في عبادته فلينظر إلى علي بن أبي طالب عليه السلام. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, do you want to see Adam in his knowledge? Do you want to see Nuh in his taqwa, in his piety? Do you want to see Ibrahim in his manners? Do you want to see Musa in his appearance and his haybah? Do you want to see Isa alayhi salam in his worship? Then look at Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. He has embodied all of these prophets that have come in the past in one person. So Ali salamullahi alayhi is no longer a person that we can sit here and waste our time and confine this important person in history to the issue of Khilafah and the dispute of Khilafah. Yes, whilst it is important to prove the haqqiyya of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam over any other person and his right to become the Khalifa of Rasulullah over any other person, but no longer is this an issue because we are living in the information age. No longer are these things hidden. No longer are these things a secret. You only just need to open the internet and read a bit of Islamic history to know that Ali salamullahi alayhi was not even someone who should be compared to anyone else. He is far more and not even to be compared to any other companion who might claim to be deserving of the Khilafah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The second issue that we have when we talk about our Imam and when we present him to the world is that we tend to talk about him in a very historic way, as if we are presenting somebody in history and we are just speaking about someone who lived in the 6th century and then he died. Whilst if we were to really do justice to Imam Ali alayhi salam, we need to talk about how he was a miracle of his time. Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi alayhi, he was like no other person of his time. He was so advanced, he was so different to any other person that lived in his time. For example, you imagine this is the 6th century. Imagine you go back to the 6th century, you have a scenario where Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi alayhi is sitting on the minbar of Masjid al-Kufa, speaking, delivering a sermon, say for example the sermon of Eid or the sermon of Jum'ah, and in the crowd is sitting a group by the name of Al-Khawarij. These Khawarij, they were living in Kufa and they were amongst the people, the residents of Kufa. However, they were his opponents. And whilst he is speaking, these Khawarij start chanting, La hukma illa lillah, La hukma illa lillah, which was their slogan, which is that no rulership belongs but to Allah. Which Imam Ali alayhi salam says this is a correct slogan but used in the wrong way. So Imam Ali alayhi salam waits for them to stop and then he goes back to speaking. Then they began chanting even more. La hukma illa lillah wa in aba abal Hasan. Even if Ali doesn't like it, la hukma illa lillah. And then the companions got up and they started wanting to attack them. Come on, be quiet. Can't you see the Imam and the Khalifa and the ruler and the governor is speaking? Have some courtesy. Imam Ali alayhi salam said, no. Leave them. A word for a word. They speak. They have the right to speak. We have the right to speak as well. We will only oppose them if they raise their sword against us. The moment they raise their sword and go to war with us and start causing insecurity and civil unrest, that is when we have the right to raise our swords against them. But just the fact that they want to speak up against me, they have every right to do that. You tell me, in the 6th century, for those who have studied history, where was there ever a government where there was a government and within that government there was an opposition? Have you ever heard of that in that time? Where was there ever a governor who had the capacity and the tolerance to withstand somebody sitting in his majlis, sitting in his courtyard, and opposing him face to face? And that's what I mean. When we talk about Ali salamullahi alayhi, we need to tell people that this is just not an ordinary man in history that came and lived once upon a time on this earth and then departed. This man was unique. He was a miracle of his time. I give you one more example. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he used to distribute the amwal of Baytul Mal by himself to make sure that everybody got an equal share. So a lady, a privileged lady from a noble Arabian family comes to get her share from Baytul Mal, and she comes with her slave. She has a female slave with her. And Imam Ali alayhi salam picks up coins, a handful of coins, the same amount, and gives it to her, and then picks up the same amount of coins and gives it to her female slave. She says to him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, I am, whatever her name is, from the noble family of this, and you give me the same amount as my slave? Imam Ali alayhi salam picks up 2 handfuls of soil. He's sitting on soil, or ground, and sand or whatever. He picks it up and he shows it to her. He says, this is sand and this is sand. What's the difference? Tell me, what's the difference between these two? She says, there's no difference. So he said to her, so why do you think you're different than your slave? إن الرب لواحد والأب واحد والأم واحدة. You all belong to one Lord, and you all come from the one father, that is Adam, and you all come from the one mother, and that is Hawa. What is the difference? Why do you think you should, you are entitled to more or you deserve more? So this concept of human equality and, fairness and justice between different colors and different ethnicities and different social class, this didn't exist in the 6th century. We're talking about a man that lived 1400 years ago. In the 6th century, there was slavery, people were being bought and sold, and there was, people were abusing each other, and you're talking about a man who used to distribute things fairly, and he used to say, I don't understand. Where do you see the differences? Please explain to me. What difference are you talking about? The third issue that we have when we present the personality and the characteristic of Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi alayh to others is that we sometimes don't use the right language. So for example, we all know a lot of good stories, we all know a lot of good facts, we all know some very good examples from the life of Imam Ali alayhi salam, but we sometimes don't use the right language, or we don't write it or script it in the right way, so that if somebody was listening or reading, they can relate it to the modern day, to the 21st century. For example, I'm sure you've all heard of the story that Imam Ali alayhi salam in his government was one day walking in Kufa, and he found a old Christian man begging. He was poor, he was old, and he was begging. So he walked past and he said to his companions, what's this? What's this I see? They said to him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, Nasrani, he is a Christian. Innahu Nasrani. He said to them, So what? So what? You use him when he was young and energetic and able to work, and now he is old and unable to fend for himself. You let him go on the street and beg and become a beggar and doesn't have any influence and doesn't have any money? Go and get him the same portion from Baitul Mal as anybody else. Just because he is Christian doesn't mean. What do we call this? If we were to take this example and spin it and use modern day language, what is that called? We can say that Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam in the 6th century established the concept of citizenship. That if you are a citizen of this government, you have the right to live in dignity and respect just like any other citizen living there, regardless of your ethnicity, regardless of your race, regardless of even your religious affiliations. Because they said to him, Ya Amir al-Mu'minin, he's Christian. In other words, he doesn't have the right to take from Baytul Mal like the Muslims do. He said, no, he has every right. Why? Because we used him when he was young and energetic. He used to work in this government. So he has every right that when he gets old and he retires, he also deserves a retirement allowance. So this is the government of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. We can say that Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam had the concept of citizenship. He had the concept of social security, which was, there was no such thing at his time. And that is, if you are old and you are needy, the government and Baytul Mal secure you from having to beg or live in a state that is of humiliation. And when we talk about Ali salamullahi alayhi and present him to the world, and we use these important keywords like citizenship and social security and social equality, then people will understand that this is just not a historical figure that came on earth and lived, and he has some spiritual characteristics, and he died, and there are people who love him, and that's it. Imam Ali alayhi salam, when it comes to his justice and his ability to establish the rule of justice, is like no other. He said to Malik when he sent him to Egypt, واشعر قلبك الرحمة للرعية والمحبة لهم والطف بهم. If you are responsible for a group of people, if you are in government, if you are leading and looking after people, then you need to make sure that you look after them with love. You look after them with care. You have to look after them like you look after your children. Where do we have a political system in the 21st century where the government say we look after our people with love and care? They do it because they have to. They do it because if they don't do it, there is social unrest. But Imam Ali alayhi salam says to Malik al-Ashtar radwanullahi ta'ala alayhi, that when you go to Egypt and you become the ruler and the governor over there, make sure your heart feels the love to care for these people. And he says, وَلَا تَكُونَنَّ عَلَيْهِمْ سَبَعًا ضَارِيًا تَخْتَنِمُ أَكْلَهُمْ. And don't take from them and go just to be in control over their property. فإنهم صنفان إما أخ لك في الدين وإما نظير لك في الخلق. These people are, remember, regardless of they are Muslim or not Muslim, they are either your brothers in faith or your fellows in humanity. And therefore, you should always look after every citizen of that government. And therefore, we can say that Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam established the foundation of what we call in this day and age human rights. And that is, all humans need to look after each other and care for each other, either as brothers in faith, because we share the same religion, or we are fellows in humanity. Not like in this day and age, the governments have been talking about human rights for years, and then when it comes to realistic human rights, they have very selective human rights, right? If you are a Ukrainian child with blue eyes and blonde hair, you have human rights. But if you are a Palestinian child with black hair and olive skin, then the hell with you. You can all get bombed and killed, and no one will even lift a finger. This is not human rights. Human rights is what Amir al-Mu'mineen Salamullahi alayhi established in Nahj al-Balagha when he said to his governors that you need to look after the people like you are looking after your own family, with love, with care. Make sure your heart is soft when it comes to caring for them. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Amir al-Mu'mineen Salamullahi alayh was not only a man of words. He didn't just say, oh, you need to be caring, you need to be loving, you need to be this, and then he gets off the minbar and lives life as if nothing has ever happened. He received the news that the army of Muawiyah had attacked a city, and they attacked innocent people, and they raided a home where there was ladies. These ladies were a mixture of Muslims and non-Muslims. And when they raided these homes, they took the jewelry of these ladies, their bangles and their necklaces and their jewelry, and took them and left. Look at what he says in Nahj al-Balagha. He says, وَلَقَدْ بَلَغَنِي أَنَّ الرَّجُلَ مِنْهُمْ كَانَ يَدْخُلُ عَلَى الْمَرْأَةِ الْمُسْلِمَةِ وَالْأُخْرَى الْمُعَاهَدَةِ. That I heard that the men entered and raided the homes of the Muslims, the Muslim ladies, and the non-Muslim ladies. فَيَنْتَزِعُ حِجْلَهَا وَقَلَائِدَهَا وَرِعَاثَهَا مَا تَمْتَنِعُ مِنْهُ إِلَّا بِالْإِسْتِرْجَاعِ وَالْإِسْتِرْحَامِ. The ladies couldn't do anything. They just begged and pleaded and said, have mercy on us, and inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. They're ladies, they couldn't do anything to defend themselves. ثم انصرفوا وافرين ما نال رجلا منهم كلمة ولا أريق لهم دم. And they just took what they wanted and they left. No one could defend them, and nobody could say a word against them. Then look at this. This is the human rights of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, that even to the 21st century, where we claim to have human rights, and there is something called the United Nations, and they have slogans for human rights, unfortunately, we don't have any implementation. He says, فَلَوْ أَنَّ امْرَأً مُسْلِمًا مَاتَ مِنْ بَعْدِ هَذَا أَسَفًا مَا كَانَ بِهِ مَلُومًا بَلْ كَانَ عِنْدِي جَدِيرًا. He says, I swear to God that if a man was to hear this news, this horrible, horrible story of these women being attacked and having their jewelry taken off them, and a person heard this news and died of sorrow, of grief of what he heard, I would not blame them. If anything, I would have all the respect for them. Because this is a very inhumane, this is a very tragic scenario, that you have innocent people being attacked and raided in their own homes, and their property is being taken off them, and they are ladies, they can't even defend themselves. This is the real human rights. And that's why the aim of my lecture today is, alhamdulillah, all of us, we have some sort of capacity to either create some awareness. That some of you, mashallah, you're very good. I follow some of you on the social media platforms. Some of you are, you have a good page with lots of followers. Some of you have good capacity with writing. You need to start introducing Imam Ali alayhi salam, and you need to, these nights of his martyrdom, we need to start making a pledge with our Mawla. Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, I will make sure that I let the world know about you, who you really are. And some of you might have the capacity, inshallah, one day to sit on the minbar and speak about Ali. Some of you might have the opportunity to write an article about Ali. Some of you might be able to record a video or do a documentary about Imam Ali. Some of you might be able to, organize some sort of awareness campaign or write a book about Imam Ali. In those things that we talked about, which is modern language, making people aware that Imam Ali alayhi salam was no ordinary historical figure, and that he was something unique in his time. He was just not an issue in history, an issue of khilafah and who deserved the khilafah, and was it Ali or somebody else, and Imam Ali said this and this person said that, and all of these things are no longer important. We need to show the world who is in need of the values of Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, who Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi alayhi is. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I have taken too much of your time, and these are the nights of Aza. So I want to take your hearts with me and continue the story of the martyrdom of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam from where we left off last night. And that was Amir al-Mu'mineen salamullahi alayhi is now in Kufa in the year 40 after Hijrah on the night of the 19th, and he has just been struck with the sword. And the narration continues to say that the news had spread throughout Kufa, and people from everywhere came running to the masjid, and they were all shouting, Wa Imama, Wa Aliyah. The companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, Usayd ibn Safwan, says, the shouting and the screaming and the signs in the sky, they were exactly like the day Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi had passed away. And people were astonished, and they entered the mosque to find Mawlana Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam lying on the floor with his head in his son's lap, Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam. Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam had wrapped his father's head with a yellow amama to stop the wound from bleeding, but they say the wound continued to trickle. A little bit of blood down his neck, down his forehead, and along his beard and his side of his face. Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam sat there crying and began to kiss the face of his father, and the tears of Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam ran down his face and landed on the face of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Imam Ali opened his eyes and looked up at his son and said to him, O son, don't cry. O son, don't cry, because you will also be killed by the poison tomorrow, and your brother Hussein will be killed by the sword, and you will be reunited with your grandfather and your mother soon. Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam said to his father, O father, who did this to you? He said, the son of the Jewish woman killed me, Abdul Rahman ibn Muljim. He said, he will appear to you from this door, and he pointed to the door of Kinda of Masjid al-Kufa. However, the poison began to run through the body of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, and he would lose consciousness. Then he would wake up, and people were busy crying and looking at the door of Kinda until they brought the enemy of Allah, Ibn Muljim, from the door of Kinda with his hands tied. People were shouting and screaming, Ya Adu Allah, why did you do this to the Ummah of Muhammad? And you killed the greatest of men. And he was being pulled by one of the companions by the name of Hudhayfah with a sword in his hand, and he was crying and screaming, this is the killer of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Until they brought him and he stood in front of Amir al-Mu'mineen. So Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam said to him, Ya Adu Allah, O enemy of Allah, are you the killer of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam? Is this what he deserved after all that he did for you? Was he not caring? Was he not a caring Imam that you treated him like this? Ibn Muljim did not speak. However, his tears began to run down his face, and then he said to Imam al-Hasan, O Aba Muhammad, are you not able to rescue the one who is in hellfire? And people exploded in cries until Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam ordered people to be quiet. Then Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam said to Hudhayfah, how did you catch him and where did you find him? Hudhayfah said, O Master, I was asleep and my wife heard the voice of Jibreel mentioning Amir al-Mu'mineen that he was killed. So she woke me up and said, are you asleep and your Imam has been killed? So I woke up shocked and I said to her, what are you talking about, O woman? She says to him, who dares and who would be able to kill the lion of Allah and the hero of Islam? She said to me, no, I definitely heard the voice. It was clear. It was saying that the wasi of Rasulullah has been killed. Every house in Kufa heard this voice. As we were talking, I heard the people in the street shouting and screaming. So I realized that what she was saying was true. So I grabbed my sword and I ran to the street and I opened my house door and I saw the enemy of Allah running away from the masjid, and the streets were now packed with people and they were heading towards the masjid. So I said to him, hey you, where are you going? He said, I have something important to go to. I said to him, but you heard the call. What happened to Amir al-Mu'mineen? He said, I don't know, but I have to go now. I said to him, wait, may Allah curse you. Your task is more important than your Imam. Whilst I was talking to him, a wind blew his clothes away, and I could see a sword under his clothes, and his sword was covered with blood. So I grabbed him and I said to him, are you the killer of Amir al-Mu'mineen? He said, yes. So I hit him and I tied his hands and I brought him to you. Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam said to his father, O father, this is the enemy of Allah, Ibn Muljim. Allah has exposed him and now we have caught him. So Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam opened his eyes. Imagine how weak Imam Ali alayhi salam was at this moment. He had already lost so much blood from his head. And he looked at him and his hands were tied and the sword was hanging by his neck. He said to him, oh you have committed the greatest deed. Was I not a good Imam to you? Did I not treat you well? What did I do to deserve this? Then Imam Ali alayhi salam turned to his son Imam al-Hasan al-Mujtaba alayhi salam and said to him, O my son, be kind to your captive and be merciful to him. Don't you see him looking like he is panicked and fearful? Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam said to his father, O father, this fajr, this la'een has broke our hearts and you are asking me to be kind to him. He said to him, yes, my son, we are the household that exchange wrongdoing with generosity and forgiveness and mercy. So I ask you, my dear son, to feed him. and provide him what he needs to drink, and do not tie his legs, for if I die, then punish him 1 strike for a strike, and if I live, then leave him for me to deal with by myself." Then Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam asked to be carried to his house. Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah, his son, narrates, he said that we had to carry our father from the ground. We carried my father, and the people were surrounding him. They were crying and weeping and slapping their faces and their heads. Me and my brother Hussein were also crying, and Hussein alayhi salam said, "Oh father, who do we have after you?" My father would say to him, "La yawm ka yawmika ya Aba Abdullah." No day is like your day, O Aba Abdullah, until they reached the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, who was standing behind the door. Zainab alayhi salam stood behind the door, looking outside from behind the door. She wanted to see what was happening. She saw her father being carried by his sons. She shouted, "Oh father, ya Ali!" Shout with Zainab, "Wa imama! Wa aliya!" Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah continues to say, "We laid our father in his musalla, and his daughters came and surrounded him." Imagine the scene. He says one of them was kissing him, and the other one was hugging him, and the other one was crying, "Father, don't leave us, oh father." Zainab alayhi salam said to him, "Oh father, who will look after the young? Who will look after us after you? Oh father, we will never stop crying for you." And she cried, and she made everyone cry. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam at that point opened his eyes and looked up at Zainab alayhi salam, and he began to cry himself. The doctor was called to check his wound. He looked at his wound and said to him, "Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, it seems like the sword was poisoned, and he should drink a little bit of milk to help him with easing the pain of the poison that is spreading through his body." Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam went and grabbed his father a cup of milk. Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam drank half of it and took it away from his mouth and said to him, "Oh my son Hassan, for my sake on you, take the other half to your captive, and don't forget to feed him and give him from what you drink." So they took the milk to the La'in ibn Muljim, and they told him that the Imam had requested for him to have this cup of milk delivered to him. Tonight, the night of the 20th, Muhammad ibn al-Hanafiyyah says, we stayed that night of the 20th of Ramadan with our father, and the poison had began to spread through his body, and it began to reach his legs that he could no longer stand, and he was praying in his position, and he continued to perform his salah. Even the nights Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam could no longer get up. He was still doing his mustahabbat, he was still doing his a'mal while he was sitting in his musalla. And in between his salah, he would give us advice and guidance all the way until the morning. In the morning, the people would begin to gather outside his house, and they asked for permission to enter the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam to see their Imam for one last time. So Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam gave them permission to enter the house. The people rushed in, they began to greet him, and Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam was answering their salam with a very low voice, until he was heard to say to them, أيها الناس سلوني قبل أن تفقدوني وخففوا سؤالكم لمصيبة إمامكم. O people, ask me anything you wish before you lose me. However, I ask you to lighten the question out of mercy for your Imam and his weakness. So people would cry and did not want to ask him any questions for what they saw, the state that the Imam alayhi salam was in. Hijr ibn Uday was one of the people who was in the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. He began to say, فيا أسفي على المولى التقي أبي الأطهار حيدرة الزكي قتله كافر زنيم لعين فاسق نغل شقي. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam looked up at Hijr and said to him, O Hijr, what would you do if you were asked to do bara'ah for me? O Hijr, what would you do if you were ever in a situation where you were asked to dissociate yourself from me? Hijr ibn Uday said to him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, I swear by Allah, if I was cut up by the sword into pieces, piece by piece, and I was burnt by fire, I would not leave you, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. I would never do bara'ah from you, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. And he was a man of true to his word. So Imam Ali alayhi salam said to him, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you on behalf of the family of your Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa inna lillah وإنا إليه راجعون. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا آل محمد أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه يكشف السوء. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه ويكشف السوء. أما يجيب المضطر إذا دعاه يكشف السوء. اللهم اكشف السوء عنا بحق مولانا أمير المؤمنين. عجل لوليك الفرج واجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه والذابين عنه والمستشهدين بين يديه. اللهم اجعلنا من أعوانه وأتباعه وشيعته المخلصين. اللهم انصر الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم انصر شيعة أمير المؤمنين واحفظهم في مشارق الأرض ومغاربها. اللهم اغفر ذنوبنا. اللهم استر عيوبنا. اللهم تقبل أعمالنا. اللهم احشرنا في رحاب محمد وآل محمد. اللهم ثبتنا على ولاية أمير المؤمنين. اللهم ارزقنا في الدنيا زيارته وفي الآخرة شفاعته. اللهم ولا تفرق بيننا وبينه طرفة عين. وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات وبالخصوص إلى أرواح شيعة أمير المؤمنين وموتى الحاضرين. رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة.